Good morning, everyone. Maybe good afternoon. It's 12:05. Thank you very much for joining us today in this important briefing. And I understand that you had a very interesting session right before this. We have a brilliant set of panelists, and it's an honor to share the panel with all of you. We have young women champions, along with the co-chair of the UN Interagency Network on Youth Development. So just to introduce my panelists, and I'll already ask them to also introduce their work as they speak. Each of the panelists will be given 5 to 7 minutes each to present in detail about their work. My name is Ravi Karkara, and I work with UN Habitat and with UN Millennium Campaign. And I'm also the global advisor to the World Conference on Youth. And one area that I am very much trying to understand and unpack is the emergence of youth-led civil society. And what does it really mean to work with youth-led organizations worldwide? And how do they really contribute to the evolution of civil society organizations? As you know, that we're looking at the post-2015 development agenda. Many of us have contributed extensively. And now many of us are discussing the implementation phase of what it will take to work in the implementation and who will be the key partners. So I think your role as DPI NGO's youth-led organization is extremely crucial as we look at this transition period of the global development agenda from MDGs to the post-2015. This year we also mark another important meeting, which is the World Conference of Indigenous Peoples Organizations. We last year had a very important meeting on the World Summit on Persons with Disabilities. We have the World Conference on Education for All this year. And we also have an important piece next year, which is the Beijing Plus 20. So very, very important period between 2014 to 2015, which will really set a lot of global agenda, review. ICPD Plus 20 is also happening, as you know, in September this year. And I think this is really a crucial scenario. And I think in the center of all this is the role of civil society organizations. So with this, I would really invite Alexandria, who is a youth representative from ECPAC USA. And I think all of us know ECPAC, one of the biggest champions on ending sexual exploitation of children worldwide, and has really brought into the world a very important mechanism, which was the organizations of the World Conference on Ending Sexual Exploitation of Children. And we've had 3 world conferences up till now, and I really request the important youth-led advocacy and the NGO participation focus you can bring. And I think before I really open up for question and answer, there are 2 things I would like to talk about. One is, and emphasize the importance that you're really taking on a responsibility of not just being here in New York, but also responsibility to many other youth-led organizations, NGOs, who don't have this path and who are not sitting here. So please, what I call the multiplier effect of reaching out to youth-led organizations, networks, both online and offline, and bringing their perspective and their dialogues and discussions into the room is very, very crucial, because I think what makes a big difference is the field reality. You know, we can be talking about a lot of things here, but there's no change taking place in the local context. So really calling and joining the global call, which is, discussing global, but also acting local, but also what is discussing local must inform, as Prateek said, the global agenda. And as it was said earlier, there's never been a better time to discuss this. What we see on the website is a very interesting fusion of a partnership between the UN system and civil society organizations. So what we see is another opportunity for all of you to set up your own individual profiles and your organizational profile. This is the World We Want 2015.org. This is the official UN and CSO co-led partnership on bringing the conversation on the post-2015 agenda. What you see on the right side is the people's voices. So you'll see all the different conversations that are taking place right now on the post-2015. This is the global call on the top. That's the one Prateek mentioned. Can you go up, please? So you see this is the President of General Assembly who is talking about consultations. This is the people's voices, which is to ensure that people's voices should inform the post-2015 agenda. And that's another Equator Initiative reaching out to civil society organization on sustainable development. And that's the one Prateek mentioned, the Global Partnership on Youth and Post-2015 Agenda. I really encourage all of you to join and make a profile. HAVA is a very, very active member of the Policy Strategy Group. And if anybody wants to be a member of the Policy Strategy Group, please let HAVA know, and she would be the enabler to connect you into this process. What we have done in the last 18 months is the UN system has organized 88 national consultations on post-2015, 11 thematic consultations, including e-discussions, and as we speak right now, there's an e-discussion on inequalities taking place. And also this whole linkage of the question of the week from the PGA and the crowding out a goal on youth is something which is very, very current. The whole agenda, as Prateek says, accountability, accountability, and accountability. I think that's the role which all youth-led organizations and NGOs and others critically play when we're having these, I would say, monologues with our own preaching to the choir kind of a discussion. So the People's Voices was something which came through a civil society organization which was started on Mandela Day. Again, that's something which Hawa was a very crucial person to play a critical role on getting us started on that, which was that if we are setting the post-2015 agenda, we cannot do this agenda without listening to and working with people out there. So how do we really ensure we eliminate poverty when we're talking about just not halving it in MDGs? So I really invite all of you, including Fordham and others, to really start coming together on becoming actively involved in the worldwe2015.org, which is the other side of the coin of myworld2015.org. So really with that call, I would open up the floor that there are many, many opportunities as we move into this very interesting junction as Prateek said, with ICPD, with Beijing Plus 20, Habitat 3, the World Conference on Indigenous People, the World Conference on Education for All, and most importantly, the setting of the next development agenda, which will really determine how the world, unlike the MDGs, which was really for the developing world, the post-2015 agenda is a universal agenda, making sure everybody here and others are part of it. I'll give you a small concern which I have for organizations which come from North here, that if you look at the My World survey, the countries which are performing the least are countries like USA, Canada, UK, Europe. I don't know why they're not engaging, because they think it's only meant for the developing world. It's not. It's meant for everyone to be extensively involved. So with that call, let me open up the floor for any questions, any comments. Over to you, please. Okay, please, ma'am, if you can introduce yourself and also your NGO and the question you're directing to.
Space Society. I wonder if I just have a clarification. We've heard the upper limit of the UN's definition of youth as 32. I haven't heard the lower limit, so I want to make sure we're all talking about the same range and what other ranges of youth there are in the discussion, excuse me.
Thank you, ma'am, and I think this is one big area which has been so unclear. I'll give you the history of it. 1981, the International Year of Youth, and the agenda at that time was there was no Convention on Rights of the Child. So the working definition of UN that time was established as youth from 15 to 24. Now, as we have moved forward, there are different definitions, and also Prateek will talk about it from a reproductive health definition. The adolescence by WHO and UNICEF is defined as 10 to 19. UN Habitat defines a youth as 15 to 32 years old. And I think a similar definition is practiced by DPI, if I'm not mistaken. And there is a global call right now, which is to look at agreeing on a legal definition. That's why I think we have a lawyer sitting here. So getting a legal definition on identifying what is the definition of youth. And this is one outcome expected out of the World Conference on Youth. And with that, maybe I should also remind everybody that as we speak right now, there's a call out there for all youth-led organizations to participate in the World Conference on Youth. And the government of Sri Lanka has agreed to pay for 250 civil society youth-led organizations that they will be paying their entire accommodation and travel. And the call is going to end tomorrow, 21st is? End of this week. So please look out, or again, Hawa can send that out to you. Otherwise, the website is wcy2014.com. wcy2014.com. Prateek, do you want to add to the definition? Sorry, anybody else on the panel?
No, I mean, the UN position is that we respect the definitions of countries, and countries are quite diverse in how they define young people. Even though most prefer a chronological definition, we also understand that youth is a socialized term. The concept of what it means to be young can change from place to place and context to context in many societies, and there is no such thing as youth. You're a child and then you get married and then you become an adult. So we're quite conscious of that, that culture as well. Sometimes youth is defined by a rite of initiation in certain cultures. So we look at that. At the UN, you notice that it's quite diverse in the way that we look at it, but there's a certain reason for that ambiguity.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Ashok and I represent Light Millennium. And a quick question, the UN volunteer program, how do we get involved in that? I wanted to ask. Thanks.
I'll ask Pratik to take on this question.
For UN volunteers, it's just their website, unvolunteers.org. You can look at the website. There's a call for applications, and you can sign up.
Just building on to that, as you know that, as Pratik said earlier, that Ban Ki-moon became the first Secretary General to prioritize youth in his second term. The three areas he talked about was, of course, the appointment of the special representative, which is the Secretary General's envoy in youth. The second was to have the system-wide action plan and the priorities, which was highlighted by Pratik. And the third, something which I really invite all of you to look at, is the United Nations Youth Volunteer Strategy. And very soon they will be launching this as, if you look at the UNV program, that's another testimony that you have to be a UNV, you need to be above 25. But something which was prioritized by Ban Ki-moon was the whole idea that youth in the age group of 18 to 24 should also really, through their voluntary action, and we see so many testimonies right now, should be recognized. So one big area which has happened in the last 2 years is the United Nations UNV's Youth Volunteer Strategy. So that's definitely something which you should be on the lookout. Please.
I just wanted to add also, if you're looking for opportunities to get involved, of course, coming up is the UN CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, and there's tons of side events that you can attend, and encourage your youth reps to attend as well if they don't have access to get into the UN conference. There's also, as Maher Nasser mentioned earlier, there'll be a UN conference back in New York in August, a UN DPI NGO conference. And there are committees, planning committees for that. So I encourage you, if you're interested in that, you can get involved. There's the CETON conference that happens at the UN, the Youth Assembly, and on the executive committee that I represent, there's the NGO reporter that comes out every 3 months. You'll be getting it as an NGO associated with DPI, and your youth reps or you can write articles about your NGO. And there's a communication workshop that's in the calendar of offerings for briefings every year, and you can also help with the planning of that. The executive committee also has a website, and we have a tab that's the youth section, and we encourage any of you that you want to write articles or post things that your NGO is doing. And we also host an NGO networking event, so you'll get those alerts as well from the executive committee. So there's definitely ways to get involved. Thank you.
Alexandria, thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to let you guys know, for the youth reps in the room as well as on the webcast, or for representatives who can relate back to their youth reps, something called the Youth Assembly. It is co-partnership between a few member states as well as an NGO called the Friendship Ambassadors Foundation. They've had it it's going on its 13th annual year, and youth reps like Katrina and myself had the opportunity to present at the assembly. A few other members on our panel were able to speak on a keynote panel on the importance of youth using NGOs as well as youth entrepreneurship. This is another way for youth to get involved as well as network and really strengthen their abilities here. Something I wanted to comment on that Pratik started was using this partnership to become educated, empowered, and also engaged. Like I said, this opportunity is going to be as much as you make of it. So the engagement is what I'd really like to highlight, and this youth assembly, as well as other youth events, is something truly that will embody engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should we take any other questions? We'll take one here and the other one there, please.
Hi, thank you, Catherine Good, DPI NGO Relations. Just a comment. Many of you indicated at the beginning of the panel that you don't yet have youth representatives, and that's something that our office is seeking to support you with. As you know, as associated DPI NGOs, you're entitled to 6 grounds passes. 2 of those are reserved specifically for youth representatives. So where you don't have a youth representative, we understand that there are a number of universities associated with DPI already and a number of individuals who are interested in helping to serve your organization. So Donella has sent out the announcements, and if you check the most recent one, you'll see that there's a Google form that you can fill out to express interest in being matched with a young person who for us is 18 to 32 at present for our representatives to add another layer of complexity to the UN's idea of youth. And we're very happy to work with you in finding a young person. It's important as a leadership opportunity. I think Alexandria and Katrina have already attested to that. But also for the NGOs and succession planning. It's important for all of us to stay current and breathe some young life into our organization. So please check the announcements and just follow up on that form that Donella has sent to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. There was another comment there. Oh, she did? Fantastic. Okay. Is any other person who would like to raise a question or a comment? Can I just add one thing? That one thing which we're dealing with is, the question about your question about age is very interesting, because as Prateek and other colleagues mentioned, that we've never really dealt with this 1.8 billion youth bulge, and the second one coming in Africa. So if you look at from a civil society perspective, from a UN perspective, international development perspective, we've not really been there in terms of, how do we recognize youth-led organizations. I do want to recognize Carlos from the Junior Chamber International, which was the first youth-led global network. They'll be celebrating 100 years next year, which actually institutionalized youth networking in 1915 in St. Louis, very much part of, your amazing country. But something which is really crucial is two things from my perspective, that we have this amazing opportunity for a young person, 2 young people to be given a ground pass. I would really make a call that really reach out to the most marginalized groups which you are working with. Really look out for young women to be part of this, indigenous, the young people coming from disabilities background or LGBTQI communities, so that we really bring the diversity of voices which are often left out. So that's really an humble request and a call to all of you, very much joining my colleague Prateek as a reminder. And second really is that this opportunity is immense, and also be part of this global force which is trying to define, and there are many organizations like USAID, Commonwealth, UN entities, and other people like DPI who are trying to unpack that what is it to really invest in the emergence of the youth-led civil society. So for example, if you look at the protocols, the registration, we still haven't really figured this out. There are very few UN organizations which are also now, for example, having youth representatives as part of their board. I mean, I work with UN Habitat, which has the Youth Advisory Board linked to its governing council, which is the apex decision-making body. UNFPA has the Youth Advisory Board attached to its program division. So that is really something which is coming up. So that's another place for you to look at, just not bringing youth-led representatives as part of but how do you bring in youth-led perspective or youth perspective by forming Youth Advisory Board to your NGOs and other areas. So with this, I think, I don't know, maybe I will ask the panelists to make some final concluding comments. So over to you, Katrina, and then we'll move this way.
I just wanted to mention as a final comment that our next Youth Rep meeting is next week, the 27th, from 3 to 4:30 in the DPI NGO Resource Center, which is where we usually hold our meetings. And usually it's every 3rd Thursday of the month, but because the orientation got moved to this week, we decided to move our meeting to next week so that youth reps can attend the orientation as well. So if you would like to attend our meeting, it's for youth reps only, but if you want to pass the message on to some youth reps, or if you're a youth rep in the room, you can email ngoyrexec exec@gmail.com, and we'll add you to our listserv so that you can get all the announcements about our meetings and other activities going on. NGOYREXEC@gmail.com. And that's where all general inquiries about the Youth Rep Committee should be addressed to.
Thank you. Three main messages, three main takeaways from my perspective. One is that definitely, I think there's no excuse not to have a youth representative, particularly if 2 passes are reserved for them. As Ravi said, it should not just be find an intern and send them for a trip around the UN. We would highly encourage you to bring young people into the leadership of your organization, recognizing that they're the biggest stakeholders for any sort of work that you're doing. The perspective that we have is that we're merely trustees for this world, which we give on to the next generation. And from that perspective, it's important to start building skills in that next generation already. So to look at young people as leaders, as important stakeholders, integrate them into the decision-making of your organization, and let this be a leadership opportunity for them. And we all are here to support you to do that. It's not easy for organizations to take that, undertake that change, but there are enough organizations who've done that already, so there are experiences that we can draw on. The second message is that this is, again, such an exciting and such a momentous year here at the UN. Again, if anyone is doubtful what the point is of a global development agenda, I think you just have to look at the successes of the Millennium Development Goals. In the last 15 years, 1 billion people got lifted out of poverty. We achieved almost universal primary education. We've closed the gender gap in primary education. In the 17 out of the 25 worst affected countries with HIV in sub-Saharan Africa, there's been a 25% reduction led by young people in HIV prevalence. We've reduced maternal mortality by 47%, in the last 2 decades. So massive progress has been made in relation to what the MDGs set out to achieve, and it's with that momentum that we're looking at the post-2015 agenda now. So you're here at this momentous time, and it's really quite momentous that you're here. And the third thing that I'll say is what Ravi said, is that there's only a few people who are privileged enough to be here at the UN. You're not just at the New York office of the UN, you're at the world headquarters of the UN. And I think with that comes the responsibility to engage with people who are not able to be here. And I think information technology makes that very easy nowadays. So we really encourage you to, one, make the best use of the fact that you're in this room, but also then be conscious of those who are not and try to work with them so that your voices bring in so much more. So with that, we'll just say thank you very much for being here. We're all here to support you and to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to echo Ravi's point about bringing the youth perspective and helping the youth be an effective advocate for your NGO. I think that would be a really great thing if you could help them with that, help them become experts in your cause, ensure that they're in the decision-making process within your NGO, to make it a meaningful opportunity and to not underestimate that intergenerational piece that both can learn from. I'm at your service, so if you have any questions later, I'll be here. Thanks.
I just have a few quick points I'd like to make. One, I would like to invite everybody in this room, if you look on your schedule, at 12:30 to 1 o'clock, or 12:30 to 2 o'clock, I'm sorry, the optional networking lunch event over in the UN cafeteria, where myself and another youth representative, Camilla, will be hosting a networking lunch. So we can all have lunch together, whether you're a youth rep or just an NGO representative, and get to know each other a little bit better. Next is anybody who does not have a youth rep, please take advantage of DPI's offering as your so-called matchmaker, because there are so many engaged, let's say, local university students who really can help support your mission. And last but not least, I know that this might be new for most of you in the room, and I want you to know, if this is at all a little bit overwhelming, that's good. You're allowed to be overwhelmed. We all were overwhelmed and still might be in certain points, but that's a good step. Being here today, you're already making an impact. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you guys at our networking event.
Thank you very much to the panelists. I just realized it's only 12:08, and I just thought maybe I should use the time a little more optimally. Just to say that the process of selection of youth representatives, and maybe before we conclude, I would really like to ask some of the DPI NGOs who've been part of selecting youth reps, that how have you done it through a transparent democratic process? Because many times we may just want to pick up somebody we know and say, you're the youth rep. So maybe if you can speak to that, because I think that's a very important value addition to make sure how democratic, gender equality, diversity friendly process it has to be. That'll be very useful for the audience.
Yeah, and you're referring specifically how you pick the young people to represent your NGO? Yeah, because on the executive committee, we had a pilot program initiative where we were helping match international NGOs with youth in the New York, New Jersey area that couldn't have their voice at the UN to physically be here. So we worked on that initiative, and so what we did was we created a model, and it's on the NGO DPI Executive Committee website as an example of a way that you can structure finding your youth rep. What we did at Fordham and what we did through NAFSA for our NGOs was we sent out an email to our faculty across the university, and we have an application where we ask the student to explain why they want to be the youth rep for the NGO, and explain what value they believe they can bring to doing that position. And then what we did was we interviewed. We got a lot of student reps that were interested at our university. We interviewed them. For the NAFSA position, we opened it up to all the universities. And so we got students from Columbia, NYU, Fordham, St. John's, and we did interviews across all the universities. So it was a harder choice to pick because, I mean, there were so many great students from all over. One of our students here, Denesis, is from NYU. She represents NAFSA. She's an international education major. And she's actually going to attend Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C. coming up through our NGO. And so our process to be transparent was basically just to send out a cattle call to all the students and ask why they believe they'd be good as a youth rep. They submit a resume, they write an essay, and then we interview them. And one of the great ones I'm excited about from St. John's is she's a science biology major, and she said that her school sort of discouraged her from applying because they didn't understand the connection between the UN and her biology science major. And I told her that she could go back and actually tell them that that's why we picked her, because we saw her background and experience could contribute to the post-2015 discussion and all the meetings that will be happening about sustainable development goals. So that's sort of how we approach that.
Thank you very much. Do you want to speak to
Speaking from the student viewpoint, I was chosen by Monmouth University because we had a similar affiliation at the UN, like Fordham, and just through a few preliminary events, I fell in love with the UN, and I actively became engaged with the partnership between academia and international governing bodies like the UN. So my organization, as well as ECPAT, tries to choose individuals who are not thinking in your average, what am I going to write on Facebook today, or what's the best new show on MTV? Youth engaged individuals who are truly concerned with where our future is going. We did a similar process of a resume, and we're not necessarily picking the students with the highest GPAs, but more well-rounded who have opportunities to contribute here as well as back at home. Like you said, with the marginalized communities, we try to close a blind eye. We are not biased to anybody, and we are open to students as well as with disabilities and other bodies at Monmouth. So that's my only advice.
Thank you very much. Katrina, you want to speak to that, please?
Well, the way I became a youth rep with my organization was our previous youth rep was leaving to start a new job, and I had just graduated from Temple University, so I was back home in New Jersey and able to come to the UN, and I graduated with political science, so I was always interested in working with the UN, but I never thought I would actually have an opportunity to come to the UN on a weekly basis. So it was kind of like just fate and luck all working together for me to be able to come, but it definitely had a lot to do with volunteering with my NGO and being really dedicated to the work of my NGO. And the president of our organization was able to see that I would, be a good fit as a youth rep for ATOP Meaningful Worlds. But I do want to mention also that last year we had a very active youth rep who would join in through Google Hangouts who was, he was autistic and he would speak to us through the computer. So within the youth rep community, there are definitely lots of marginalized groups, and like our Argentina friends, they are not able to come here, but we try to be as inclusive as possible to all youth voices. And we're definitely still working on how to engage more youth to be a part of our committee.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Pratik, do you want to say something very quickly?
I mean, just quickly, I'll say that representation is a funny word, and there's ways to do it well and there's ways to do it badly. It's quite easy to say, hey, you represent young people now, and now you can be put up on a panel and now you represent everything that young people ever have to say in the world. And I think that that's tricky. No one person can represent a community or constituency as diverse as young people. I think the most that you can do is you can facilitate dialogue. So allow the opportunity for any youth representative you select to be able to consult with a wider community, create opportunities for consultations, focus group discussions, or engagement with young people in addition, so that they can be at best a representative of a few other people that they've spoken to, that they're able to consult and facilitate and not be tokenistic.
Thank you very much. And I just thought it would be important for you to listen to that perspective, because a lot of time, in some ways, we've seen that tokenism comes in or nepotism comes in. We just bring people we know. And I think it's so important to bring in the diversity and gender perspective while really looking at those young people. And I really agree with your point. It's not the GPA. It's about your GPA on social justice, human rights, social inclusion. That's the most crucial than anything else. I wanted to, since we have time, just 5 minutes, I want to spend to give you an example of what a partnership between NGOs, youth-led organizations, and UN can do. Because at least 3 people in this panel have referred to the My World survey. This is an open source survey. This is the first time an open source survey has been ever created. And all of you can look and play with it when you're at home or in your websites right now. It's data.myworld2015.org. So you need to know where these voices are going, where these votes are. So if you can look at it, it's data.myworld2015.org. And if you can please click on the partners thing on the right side. Now this is really interesting. See the kind of partners you have there. You have UN partners listed at the same level as Youth Action for Social Responsibility India, or One Campaign. So this is a very interesting place where there's no hierarchy of UN organizations, an adult NGO, or a youth organization. The idea is to really bring all people that are working on strengthening people's voices on post-2015. Now, what does it really tell us? Because it's great to see how it's now being used, as Pratik pointed out, informing the agenda for the crowdsource, which is being launched yesterday. But if you can go down to the segment priorities, leave the partners, just click back on the main page, yes. If you can go to segment priorities. A question before I explain this. How many of you have taken the My World survey here in the room? Okay, so see, it's still a small, it's a minority, but you definitely extremely crucial that everybody takes this as a flagship project. And it's very, very easy. So basically what you're seeing is almost 1.5 million votes, and we have another 500,000 which are yet to be uploaded, which will be 2 million very soon. I think by May. Government of Sri Lanka has pledged about a 1 million vote. Microsoft has pledged about 10 million votes to be brought in. Ban Ki-moon has pledged that he would like to see and has asked for support for 100 million votes by September this year. So everybody here, we need you to come in. Now look at the priorities which the world is telling us. A good education, better health care, better job opportunities. And the fourth is interesting, an honest and responsive government. Affordable and nutritious food, access to clean water, sanitation, protection against crime and violence. Now this is the one I want to speak to, because as you know, that what does it really do? When the high-level panel was making its final decisions and deliberating that what should go in and what should not, there was a point, which is an anecdote, that it said that they referred to that what the My World survey was looking at in terms of protection from crime and violence, because the room was divided. Some of them did not want to see crime and violence being prioritized as a prospective goal, whereas the other room thought, yes, it should be. But then when they listen to the voices of people out there, and you can play with this, you can do a gender analysis, you can do age disaggregation of this. That's the first time you see out there an initiative led by the UN, partner with civil society organizations, private sector coming together, completely open source, calling for open partnerships, and saying that let's join forces and bring people's voices. It's very rudimentary, it can be criticized because it's very, very simplistic. People say, oh, what does it mean? The whole idea is to reach out to voices of people who are not part of our development community. How does an average person out there, a woman in slum? So we have images of a 15-year-old girl sitting with a 85-year-old woman and asking her grand or great-grandmother, tell me what your priorities are. So the Girl Guides, the Scouts movement, the United Nations Volunteer Program, the other volunteers and NGOs like yourselves have greatly contributed to both the offline mobilization and the online mobilization. So this is where the voices are really coming in, and this then gets what we say, the new word is the data visualization and data mining. So if you go to the worldwewant2015.org, remember I pointed out the People's Voices series. That's a 4-page document which goes as a formal submission. It went as a formal submission to the Open Working Group process, and it will be going as a formal submission to the PGA's 3 thematic consultations and 3 high-level meetings. So really invite you that whatever you're doing is so important, and what we are trying to do in the UN system is to ensure that the voices of youth-led organizations are just not having an isolation, a nice survey is kept on a side. It is really contributing to the global discussion and dialogue. So with this, I would really say that thank you so much to DPI for always initiating and championing the youth agenda, and all brilliant youth speakers and my colleague here from the Interagency Network, the co-chair. To all of you that I think the conversation has just started, feel free to hound any of us, that's your right. You make sure that you take my card or anybody's card, and if you don't reach out, that's really, the ball is now in your court. The ball was in our court before the panel, but now after the panel it's in your court. We're there to really support, and if we don't support, you can hold us accountable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to break now for lunch, and I hope that you'll all take advantage of Alexandria's invitation to meet with you, not to buy your lunch, but to meet with you in the UN cafeteria. Cash and credit card are accepted, and it'll be a chance for all of you to get to know each other. At 2 o'clock, we'll be back in this room for the Legal Affairs, Police, and Security briefing. The police will be here at 2, not before then, so please bring your valuables with you so that they don't disappear, and then we'll see you back here at 2 o'clock. Thank you.